Chapter 10. Tomorrow. The next morning, once again, found Darian repulsively chirpy, eating Weetabix and pouring his way through the newly delivered copy of The Guardian. Or rather the film and showbiz supplement. Morning, babes. He looked up with a dazzling grin. You do like the papers with lots of words in 'em. I gave him a dour. It's too early for anything, especially you look. And what is the use of a book? Thought Darian, without pictures or conversations. Clever bloke, that Darian. And I know I didn't do good at school or nothing, but I have read Alice in Wonderland. He hesitated a moment, before adding a bit sheepishly, and I seen the movie. Congratulations, yeah. I got culture. Me, I went to make a cup of tea while he burbled on. When I was kid, we had these books what my mum used to have, with these red leather covers and gold lettering on 'em. I thought they was like proper quality, you know. We had like Robin Hood and Alice in Wonderland and The Lion, and The Witch and the Wajamacalet. I used to read 'em all the time and think about my mum reading 'em when she was my age. I made a bland noise, to indicate I was listening, but only because I had no other choice. Sorry, babes, he said. I do run on. But speaking of culture and whatever, I was wondering, what I'm like doing some modeling at Essex Fashion Week, 'cause I could not quite contain a spurt of laughter. Essex Fashion Week? Do all the models go down the catwalk in white stilettos? He gave me a slightly wounded look. Mate, that's well AHT of order. It's being, I dunno, racist or somein'. You're being racist against Essex. Racist against Essex, indeed. I bit back the scornful response such a statement deserved. I suppose you have a point, I said, instead. It is, after all, unacceptable to make judgments about other people based on the color of their skin, even if that color happens to be orange. What's wrong with you? That's me you're mugging off. I was joking. Was you, said Darian, putting down his spoon with a clink, and regarding me with rather cold gray eyes. 'Cause it sounded like you wasn't. I sat down at the table. Just forget it. Go on, tell me about Essex Fashion Week. Or your happy childhood memories. Or whatever else you want. I'm listening. He frowned, opened his mouth, and shut it again. Then frowned some more. Yeah, a white, he said finally, though still with a wary expression. It's sorta like Paris or London or Milan or whatever. Only like in Essex. You do know there's a bit of a difference in scale there, right? It's a big thing, babes, whatever you say. He took a deep breath. Do you maybe want to come? I blinked. To Essex Fashion Week? Well, it's only a day, really. Wait. The Great International Essex Fashion Week is really only Essex Fashion Day. Can you stop being a bedland? Do you want to come? No. There was a long silence. Right, said Darian. I took a sip of tea, relief banishing the stinging needles of anxiety that were darting up and down my arms, easing the tension that had settled on my shoulders. That had gone about as well as it ever did, and there was no further danger of false expectation. Or false hope. Why not? Asked Darian, sudden and swift as a blade. Pardon, why don't you want to go with me? Because I can't imagine anything more excruciatingly dull, right? He said again. And then, coaxingly, AUDIOBOOK, babes, it'll be a right laugh. There'll be celebrities there and everything. You can meet all my mates, and my nan. And you'll see me do my thing. His eyes caught mine. You like looking at me doing my thing. He leaned over the table and put his fingertips playfully against my lips, making me flinch back. I think you like it lots. Even I didn't have the balls to try to deny that one. Well, you're moderately pleasing to look at. There, yes. Go to Essex. To a fashion show. Throw myself among strangers and hope for the best. This wasn't a book signing or an interview or a carefully orchestrated social occasion. It was the utter unknown. How could I prepare for that? How could I make it safe when my ability to perform for the world came and went as randomly and unreliably as an ashamed lover? And, someday, it would all come crashing down. And the world would see me for what I was. And then I wouldn't even have these pieces of pride to live for. But maybe it would be fine. Maybe I would deride myself for ever having let terror paralyze me over something so trivial. But maybe it wouldn't. Maybe the damn event would loom over me like the shadow of a waiting hydra until I could barely get out of bed for dreading it. Maybe it would be nothing but a grim struggle, a quiet dying like an animal caught in a trap of spiked smiles and metal words. I see, Kent. Why not? Asked Darian, as if the answer could be simple mental eel. I mean, I don't want to. God, what was wrong with me? Why couldn't I just tell him I was? But the words were stuck, sharp-edged, in my throat. The truth was, I'd rather be a dick than a lunatic. I'd rather be hated than pitied. It's not my thing. How'd you know what's your thing till you've tried it? I don't have to stick a tarantula up my arse to know I wouldn't enjoy it. This'd be better than that, babes. Wow. You're really selling it. There was another silence, and I thought perhaps this would be the end of the matter. So, Darian drummed his fingers on the table. You like sleeping with me, but you don't like being with me. I'm not tattoo material. Darian, yeah. I got that, mate. But, there's like a spectrum between marrying someone and just using them. We all use each other, I said, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. At least nobody is lying, mate. That ain't true. I gave him an arch look. But you're so very usable. He eyed me steadily. Oh, white, he said at last. You're called, babes. I'll send the tickets and you can bring your mates or whatever. Or you can throw 'em in the bin. I mean, the tickets. Not your mates. He got to his feet. Where are you going? Home. Got stuff to do. Gotta shoot tomorrow. Oh, right. Yes, of course. I suddenly realized I'd probably never see him again. And I felt a little dazed. Are you? Will I? Yes, 66, see you again. I finished pathetically, knotting my dressing gown cord round my fingers. Course. I looked up. His smile flashed. At Essex Fashion Week, my heart twisted like somebody was trying to wring it out. I did my best impression of a charming smile, lifting what I hoped might be a provocative eyebrow. One for the road. I gotta get going. He was already halfway out of the kitchen, but I went after him, caught him by his arms, and spun him against the doorframe, leaning up to kiss him hard and urgently. Just once more. Then I'd let him go. What about a quickie then? Babes. He laughed, a little awkwardly against my mouth. I wound myself around him. Don't go. Pressed a hand between his legs. Not yet. He said again, the heat of his mouth spilling into my mind, as sweet as wine in summer. I'll miss my train. Fuck the train. I tried to smile. Tried to make desperation attractive. Fuck me instead. He untangled me. I gotta go. And did. Alone, resoundingly alone, I slumped onto my kitchen floor. Now who felt like a prosy? I told myself to try to find it funny. Because it was, wasn't it? In some grotesque, mortifying way. But my thoughts only echoed, bringing back nothing but themselves. Chapter 11. Another day. A tatty brown envelope, with an Essex postmark and my address incorrectly spelled, lay on my doormat. I stared at my newly cleaned, very white whiteboard, trying to muster the energy to plot my next book. I'd squandered most of last year on something that was supposed to be a companion piece to The Smoke is Briars, excavating what was left of my soul in pursuit of something worthwhile. But what was left of my soul had sucked, and now I was behind schedule on the next rip glass, with no ideas and no interest. Oh, what was the point? It wasn't even as though I needed the money. I owned the flat and antidepressives expenses were close to negligible. But if I didn't write, then I would literally do, and be, nothing. A complete waste of a life. Another day, 3:30, sleepless, and wanking without satisfaction to the memory of the taste of lip gloss. Another day, glass ceiling. Glass half empty. Stained glass. Broken glass. Sea of glass. Smooth as glass. Shattered glass. Rose-tinted glass. Glass houses. Another day. What in God's name had possessed me to think glass would be a sensible name for my detective? Then I remembered, I'd only intended to write one book about him. Not 6. I should kill the bastard off. Another night, scrabbling around in the dark, fingers shoved inside myself, altogether a poor substitute. Another day, Edgelkratzplatzter. And I could call the book whatever I damn well pleased. Assuming I was willing to write about the adventures of a 50-year-old German housewife. Fuck you, Rick Glass. Another day, Rick Glass had run out of cigarettes and discovered a corpse in the middle of his living room. Another day, shot glass. Breaking glass. Glasshopper. Cracked glass. Under glass. Razor glass. Crowned glass. Glasswork. Glass blower. Maybe not. Fiberglass. Wine glass. Hourglass. Glassolalia. Fuck it. Another night. 4:07 was the worst time. The world had stopped moving around me. I was a prisoner of time. Memory tore at me like vultures. Why couldn't I sleep? Room. Another day. It was not a good day. Not only had Rick Glass run out of cigarettes, but there was a dead body in his living. Another day. Homicide detective Rick Glass smelled burning flesh and knew. Damn it. Another night. Darian. How can you miss something you've never really had? Another day. Best-selling crime novelist A.A. Winters sat at his desk unable to write and thought perhaps he would never have a good day again. Another day. Afternoon was dripping into evening. Sleeping and waking had blurred into a gray haze. There was a packet of Weetabix on my kitchen table, the gaudy yellow box burning my heavy eyes. I didn't even like Weetabix, but I couldn't find the motivation to throw it away. Room. My routines were crumbling around me. I could feel depression gathering like shadows in the corners of the in short, I was fucking up. I put my head in my hands. Realized they were shaking. Folded my fingers together tightly until they stopped. There was a tatty brown envelope, with an Essex postmark and my address incorrectly spelled, propped against the empty fruit bowl. Another night, in the buttery half-light of a spring dawn, I sat cross-legged on the floor where we had fucked atop my Scrabble board and opened Darian's envelope. It contained, as I had known it would, 2 glossy, complimentary tickets to Essex Fashion Week Day. There was no note. But on the inside flap of the envelope there was the shining pale pink imprint of his lips. I rested my chin on my palm to smother something that felt like it could become a smile. Then I rang Niall. His voice, when he finally answered, rasped with sleep and alarm. Are you all right? Yes. I'm fine. I just wondered if you wanted to come to Essex Fashion Week with me. Jesus Christ, Ash. It's 5:30. Have you taken your medication? Yes. Not insane at the moment, thanks. It's next week. What is Essex Fashion Week? Except it isn't really a week. It's only a day, Niall groaned. I could picture him running a hand through his sleep-tousled hair and falling back against his pillows with a despairing flump. He was even worse in the morning than me. It had led to grim and silent breakfasts. I have to be up in 45 minutes. Will you come with me? What? Where? He asked. I have a meeting this morning. It's important. Perhaps I shouldn't have rung him so early. But my determination might have faltered if I'd waited. I certainly couldn't imagine making a decision like this at any other time. It had to be wrung out of me when I was weak, foolish, and impulsive. To say nothing of lonely, miserable, and half delirious with lack of sleep. To Essex, I said, as patiently as I could. Not today. Next Monday. Why do you want to go to Essex? An unanswerable question. Essex Fashion Week. There was a silence. Is this a dream? Why the hell do you want to go to Essex Fashion Week? Because there's a man I can't stop thinking about. Because I feel terrible and I want him. Research, I said. Research, why yes. You're setting the next Rick Glass in Essex. Yes. It's going to be called, I waited for inspiration to strike me from nowhere. And, unbelievably, it did. The Glass of Fashion. Oh, that's quite good. Yes. I said dazedly. Yes, it is. All right, then. I'll take a day off and pick you up next Monday. I let the phone slip from my hand. In less than a minute, I'd somehow lost control of everything. I'd not only committed myself to attending a fashion show, but I'd claimed to be writing a book about it too. And the pretend book I would never have dreamed of writing even had a fucking title. No plot, of course. But it had a title. I went upstairs to my study and wiped my latest attempt at a decent outline off the board. It was, in all honesty, no loss. I stared at the white horizon, wondering who to kill. A brilliant but hated designer. An innocent young model. An embittered has-been. A prestigious guest. A resentful journalist. I felt a little dizzy, as though I were standing on the edge of a cliff. But I wasn't afraid. The vanishing point of the mind's eye, the locus of the gyre, was whispering to me across imagined waves. It would have been, at that moment, effortless to step onto the breath of the wind and be borne away like a falcon. But it was only mania tugging on the kite string of my consciousness. Glittering promises that were nothing but ashes. Falling, not flying. I scribbled some notes while the ideas were fresh and, finally, crawled into bed. I had no expectation of rest. But I slept, deep and dreamless, and awoke safely on the ground. No cliffs or quagmires. Chapter 12. Essex. Fashion Week. Essex Fashion Week was being held at a golf and country club near Chigwell, the sort of place that's self-identified as a manor despite having been built in the 1990s. We eased into a gravel-lined car park not far from the main building, which was an inoffensive white square topped by a triangular roof that seemed to want to suggest chalet. Pale green countryside, most of which was golf course, surrounded us on all sides. So far, so chocolate box. Ye gods, said Niall, as a bevy of heavily bronzed women in tiny dresses tottered past on skyscraper wedges. We're a pair of pale-skinned brunettes in Essex. I think they're going to burn us like at the end of the Wicker Man. I nodded. Or you'll be whisked off to room 101 and threatened with an immediate spray tanning, and I'll say, do it to Ash. Do it to Ash. But, I said, in a brainwashed monotone, I love Essex. Niall chuckled. The spring sunlight picked out a gleam of gold in his dark hair, and I suddenly remembered, not so much with my mind but with a rush of unexpected feeling, why we'd once been friends. We made our way towards the main entrance, following the crowds into which we absolutely did not blend. I tried to ignore the stares. I think people were trying to work out whether we were celebrities or not. Follow the orange brick road, I whispered to Niall. I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, he whispered back. Inside, a champagne reception was in full swing. Not wanting to jeopardize my equilibrium or start an argument with Niall, I virtuously declined my free drink. We were in a fairly generic function room, most of which was taken up by a catwalk in the middle and a lavish VIP area. There was a lot of activity over there, the click and flash of cameras filling the air like a chorus of clockwork crickets. Essex seemed to really love its reality TV stars and talent show contestants. We wandered over to the exhibition rooms, where there were a number of booths belonging to local boutiques, fashion brands, and salons. If I'd ever wanted hair extensions, now was clearly the time. Niall, on his third glass of champagne, had relaxed enough to charm a very blonde, very gay 17-year-old and buy a t-shirt which read "Live Young, Die Fast." He took off his shirt and put it on immediately, much to the appreciation of the 17-year-old. I can't tell whether it's ironic, a mistake, or absolute genius, said Niall. But I think I love it. It's well written, avowed the 17-year-old, nodding sagely. Just then came a cry of "Oh my God, babes," and I turned just in time to receive an armful of durian. "I didn't think you was coming." "Neither did I said, when he stopped kissing me long enough to allow me to answer. "AWW, babes, you've made me so APPY, that's like so beautiful," said the 17-year-old. "Research," said Niall. "I see." I blushed so hard, it was almost painful. As though I were about to spontaneously combust. Yes. Darian, this is my friend Niall. Niall, this my. Darian, pleasure to meet you. Darian said Niall coldly. Darian flashed one of his bright white grins. Thanks, mate, glad you could make it. Niall glanced between us. Darian tugged on my hand. Come on, babes, you gotta meet everyone, he wriggled. Oh my god, still can't believe you came. I cast a helpless glance in Niall's direction. He shook his head and followed as Darian pulled me into one of the side rooms. It was full of people. Golden-legged women in bright dresses. And athletic-looking men in very shiny, very pointy shoes. Oh God. Oh White, you lot, Darian called out. This is Ash, what I was telling you about. And his mate, Niall. They've come all the way down from London. We were surrounded. Names flew shrieking past me like fighter planes. Most of the women, at least, seemed to be called Lauren. This is Gary, babbled Darian. I shook hands with a man who basically looked like the platonic ideal of David Beckham. God. No wonder Darian had his name tattooed on his hip. If I'd slept with someone like Gary, I'd want the world to know it too. And this is my Nan. I bent down on instinct to receive a brief hug from a tiny old woman wearing a lot of purple. And this is my girl Chloe. I exchanged double-cheek kisses with Jessica Rabbit, bouncing awkwardly against her truly spectacular cleavage. She's like my best mate in the world, explained Darian. If I had a sister, she'd be my sister, so it's not incest or nothing like that, she agreed placidly. Incest? What the fuck? You're sleeping together, the words tore out of me before I could stop them. She giggled. That'd be silly, Darian's gay. I glanced hastily at Niall. His expression was unreadable. But you just said, I went on carefully, it wasn't like incest. I just meant we're like so close in this deep like, what do you call it, like being on the same wavelength all the time. Psychotic. Psychic, babes. Offered Darian. Yeah, not psychotic. That's like wanting to kill people. Oh no, I didn't mean that, she laughed. It was peculiarly charming, though it had no right to be. It's just we've got this bond, right? So it would be sort of like incest if we was really related, right? I said, as it seemed the safest possible answer. They did practically grow up together, said Nanny Dot. She was always popping around there and he was always over there. I think I told you Chloe's got her own boutique, added Darian proudly. And these, he gestured to indicate the clothes that surrounded us, are all her designs. Me and Gary and some of the girls are gonna be modeling them later. Congratulations, I said. Chloe smiled, showing teeth as wide and straight as Darian's. I love claws, so it's like hunged past a dream come true. Gary put a perfect hand gently on her shoulder. You totes deserve it, Chloe. You worked well hard for this. You should get me to do your PR for you. I'm thinking like quality Jesus on the door with their shirts off. I'm not sure that's right, honey, she said. You leave it to me, gal, said Gary, enthusiasm undiminished by outright rejection. There ain't nothing that don't need quality Jesus. The man had a point. Maybe you should do it, then, said Darian mischievously. Nah, I'm gonna be organizing it, aren't I? Someone is to check the Jesus. Make sure they look white. I mean, bloke comes in, nice face, so you get him out there. Turns out he's a right chubber. Can't have that. Chloe turned to me. You should come see the shop, honey. I don't really need a sequin mini dress. Thanks, I said. I do men, too. She ain't lying, said one of the Laurens, to great hilarity. It's just down Brentwood, she continued, when the laughter had died away. It's called Bedazzled. I thought it'd be like Vajazzled except, bedazzled. I thought it was, I said, bedazzled is a real word, right? She blinked, her lashes beating like the wings of a hummingbird. Is it, pardon my mistaking eyes, that have been so bedazzled with the sun, that everything I look on seemeth green? 999. There was a long silence. Shakespeare, I said. Oh, honey, breathed Chloe. That's so clever of you to know that. Darian, babes, he's so clever. Well, I said, You invented it independently of Shakespeare, so that technically puts you on par with him. She shook her head, tossing a chaotic spill of wine dark curls over her shoulders. You're so sweet, honey, but I wouldn't get bedazzled like you said 'cause I always wear sunglasses. Beside me, Niall burst into hysterical laughter. Thankfully, at that moment, we had to go and take our seats because the show was starting. I want an explanation, whispered Niall, as people began drifting slowly back to the main function room, carrying us along like flotsam. I wasn't completely lying, I lied. I am thinking of setting the next book here. Not completely lying, he snarled. Fuck you. All you do, all you've ever done, is lie to me. And what about Daryl, or whatever his name is? I suppose you're researching his cock. It's Darian. And I like him, Niall snorted. How can you like him? Even putting aside the fact you've spent the last 5 years telling me you're incapable of liking anyone. He makes Winnie the Pooh look like Kasparov. Well, I wasn't intending to play chess with him. No shit. It's pathetic, Ash. Even for you. The depressive and the idiot. I flinched, glancing around in case someone had overheard. Can you keep your voice down, please? I don't want everyone to know. Okay, there was a pause. You mean you haven't told him? And no, Niall shook his head. You and your fucking lies, and then the lights dimmed and the show started. It consisted, for the most part, of a succession of big-haired, highly glossed, occasionally orange models strutting up and down in a variety of figure-revealing outfits. The designers and the dresses soon blurred into an interchangeable rainbow, and my mind drifted, idle as smoke rings on a Sunday afternoon. I thought of Darian. Even here, where everything was bright and brash and fake, he glittered like something real. It was terrifying to want something as much as I wanted him. It was far too precarious and far too dangerous to imbue anything, or anyone, with that sort of power. Not when I couldn't trust myself. All it did was make him into something else I would lose, destroy, or have taken away. But, in truth, I would have told 1,000 lies to have him, and 1,000 more to keep him. As Niall had discovered a long time ago, the ability to make me happy was its own curse. Oh, thank God, he said, when the lights came up and the applause died away. I was starting to lose the will to live. I'm afraid there's more later. I flicked through the booklet. And we still haven't seen Chloe's collection. He peered over my shoulder and groaned. Well, at least it wraps up with designer underwear. I'm not very interested in clothes, but I'm quite interested in watching muscular young men walk up and down in tight pants. That's our national sport, darling, he grinned. Perhaps I'd been forgiven. Again. But before he could finish, Darian came bounding over. It was all I could do to repress my stupid smile. Babes. He hunkered down in front my chair. I got a massive favor. Believe me, this is already a massive favor. Yeah, I know. But the thing is, right, one of Chloe's models has gone down with leprosy. Wait, interrupted Niall. Leprosy. That's what Chloe said. That thing with your throat where you can't talk. That's laryngitis. Oh, yeah. What's she like? Anyway, babes, do you think maybe you could come and stand in or summon? He looked up at me with huge, beseeching eyes. Please, babes. Holy fuck. No, it's not a big deal or nothing. It is a big deal. Darian, I could never do something like that. I'm sorry. Respected crime novelist has nervous breakdown in Essex. On catwalk. While orange. You just have to walk up and down, he said reassuringly. You're well sexy, babes. I promise. You look more like a proper fashion model than I do. Flattering but very much not the point. I shook my head. I can't. I just can't, he said. No, that was Niall. I should have been grateful, but, somehow, I wasn't. It was an unwanted reminder of my own frailty and everything I should have been able to do but couldn't. Heedlessly, I gripped Darian's hand. I'm so sorry, I stared into his upturned, hopeful face. Please don't ask me to do this. I really can't, he grinned and squeezed my hand. It's a white, babes. Just thought I'd give it a go. I squeezed back. You don't mind? Course not. Still love you, babes. Pardon, but he'd bounced away. Don't get your hopes up, said Niall dryly. That's just the way they talk around here. They love everything. Especially hairspray. Shall we get going? What? You want to leave? I thought you would, but I cast a slightly hopeless glance in the direction Darian had gone. Niall made an impatient sound. This is fucking ridiculous. I don't know what's going on with you and Darian, it's the sex, I drawled. It's fantastic, he continued as if I hadn't spoken. But you need to get over it, right now. Before someone gets hurt. Before you hurt yourself. What's that supposed to mean? You're ill, Ash. You're not capable of living a normal life. You know it? I know it. But do you think it's something Darian is going to understand or accept? You haven't even told him you're bipolar. For God's sake, it hasn't been a problem with him, I said faintly. Oh, come on. You're giving him false expectations. Have you seen the way he looks at you? He's going to want things from you that you just can't give him. Like today. Like now. You're lying to him and lying to yourself. You're building a house of cards and it's going to come crashing down. I can't keep saving you. I seem to be quite busy with all this lying and building you have me doing, I snapped. And, for the record, I've never wanted you to save me. Without me you'd be dead or in an institution. I stood up, and then blurted out, well, maybe false expectations are better than no expectations. Niall shrugged. Let's not have this argument. Let's go home. Fuck you, I said, and ran after Darian. He'd long since been swallowed by the crowd, so, after some aimless shoving, I made for Chloe's booth. She was surrounded by people in various states of undress and looked about as stressed as someone with that much Botox could look, but she still had a smile for me. Darian, I panted. He said you needed help. Oh, honey, are you sure? He didn't think it would be your thing. It's not, but, I felt suddenly sick on the magnitude of it all. Try. Though if you come near me with spray tan, I will end you, she giggled. Oh white, honey. You're literally saving my life there. She kissed me chastely. She smelled sweet and sticky, and her lips tasted faintly of strawberries. In some strange way, it reminded me of Darian and gave me courage. She dived into her rails of clothing and returned a few moments later with her arms full of dark fabric. Try this, honey. I clutched and looked round anxiously for somewhere to change that wasn't in full view of Essex. Chloe nudged me into a sheltered corner and pulled some of the racks in front of me. There you go, she smiled and left me to it. Oh God. Oh God. Just don't think about it. I shed my bespoke suit and stuffed it into a Tesco's carrier bag I found lying on the floor. Oh, how the mighty have fallen, and then slithered into a pair of artfully distressed waxed denim jeans that fit so tightly they camper. Eyelessly close to being leggings. There was no way my wallet wouldn't ruin the line, so I dug out my Ulster card and my door key and slid them into the back pocket as though I were a 16-year-old on the pull. Oh God. Oh God. I hadn't worn anything like this since, well, before hospital, at least. And then I shook out the top, which turned out to be a very low-cut V-neck in jersey cotton, also distressed, with ripped sleeves and a pattern of holes and tears about the neckline and across the front. I clutched it to my naked chest like an assaulted Victorian virgin. Chloe, I whispered. Chloe. I can't wear this. Course you can, honey. What's the problem? Before I could stop her, she swept behind the racks and in sheer fright, I dropped the t-shirt. Fuck. I scrabbled after it, an operation rendered both difficult and intimately painful by the jeans. And then Chloe gently caught my wrist, and I froze. The pad of her index finger traced the long, jagged scar that ran up my forearm. I normally wouldn't have allowed anyone to do that, but it was as if she held me bewitched with the warmth of her painted eyes. Oh, honey, she said softly. You was really going for it. I shuddered, then nodded. She let me go, leaving the rest untouched. I think I was relieved. The ruined skin on my arms burnt and shivered like a waking monster. The next moment, she was all business again, casting an appraising look over the rest of me. "You look lovely," she said. "It really suits you, that look. Scarred and shirtless, but," she continued, ignoring me, "you'll need a belt with those." She pointed helpfully in the direction of my hips. "Put the top on and I'll get you like a coat or something. And some boots." She was back in what felt like seconds, with a studded belt and some heeled, snakeskin patterned boots that I was still dazed enough to put on without protest. "I was going to have Darian modeling this with nothing else." She smirked and passed me what appeared to be a loosened octopus. "Good Lord, I'd welcome." "Wait, just this," I said. "It's a cardigan." She gave a horrified shriek. Suicide and self-harm were something this girl could take in her stride. But cardigans were beyond the pale. "It's not a cardigan," she squeaked. "Well, it is a cardigan, but it's like a real glamour cardigan. Jannar would mean, I think. My dear, that's what they call an oxymoron, a contradiction in terms. Well, they haven't seen my cardigans, have they?" "Put it on." I stuck my arms through the sleeves. It was basically a cross between a cardigan and a shawl, with waterfall lapels at the front and a pair of asymmetric tails at the back that flowed down past my knees. There was also a sort of scarf, which turned out to be very long and growing like a set of tentacles from the collar. "I feel like I'm in hentai," I muttered as I got tangled up. "What's that, honey?" "Nothing." She caught up the two ends of the scarf and wound them about my neck and shoulders, letting them fall loosely where they would. It should have been an ill-intentioned object, but the wool was incredibly soft. Maybe I was losing it in my old age, but I think I genuinely liked it. Also, Chloe was right. The thought of Darian wearing nothing but this was pleasing in the extreme. She smiled proudly at me. "See? It's like a cardigan, but like not a cardigan. Like sexy but snuggly." "Well, I'm neither sexy nor snuggly," she giggled. "That's not what Darian says." I blushed. "You aren't going to tell him, are you?" I said. "Tell him what about my..." "About?" I gestured to my arms. "I just don't want him to know." She gave one of her slow, contemplative blinks. "Do you think just 'cause he's a PPY ain't never had something bad happen to him?" Before I could answer, she went on. "Now, honey, I know you said no to spray tan and I'm like totes respecting that. But how do you feel about bronzer?" About 10 minutes later, I was bronzed, glossed, quiffed, lash curled, and guy-linered. What the fuck had I done? I stared at a stranger's reflection in the mirror. I haven't really recognized myself for a very long time. It just wasn't me. I drew in a few slow, steadying breaths. All I had to do was keep breathing, walk a few meters down a catwalk, and come back again. Maybe I could do this. Maybe I could. I nearly laughed aloud at how easy it seemed just then. The stranger's eyes shone. "Oh my God, babes." Darian's reflection appeared next to mine and I spun quickly away. He was wearing ripped jeans, a white shirt split to the navel, and a slim-fitting blue velvet jacket. "You look well, nice." His eyes traveled up and down my body, making me hot and self-conscious and thrilled all at once. "Well, nice. Like Sandy at the end of Grease." My mouth fell open. "Did you really just compare me to Olivia Newton-John?" "I just meant like going from, prim to all sexed up. I feel weird." "You look Amazon." "Amazon?" He pulled me against him, hands snaking under the glamour cardigan to make the acquaintance of my arse. Chloe gave a warning screech. "Don't smudge him," he grinned, tilting his head because, in my heels, I was just a little bit taller than he was. "You're giving me chills, babes." "Is that so?" "Are they multiplying?" hunged passant. "You'd better shape up, then. You're like totally the one that I want." "Thank you for doing this, babes." "You didn't have to, I know. I don't know. I just hope I don't fuck it up." "What's to fuck up, babes?" "It's just walking down a room with everybody thinking they want to do you." I gave a shaky, unconvincing laugh. "I know it ain't you," he said, after a moment. "But it ain't nothing to be scared of. Fear isn't rational." He nodded. We'll be cheering you on all the way. I raised a brow. And wanting to do me, always, babes. It don't matter what you're wearing. Heedless of Chloe's warning, I kissed him. It was a claggy business. When we unstuck our mouths, Darian was laughing. I think we just swapped lip gloss. The next 20 minutes of my life rushed by like motorway traffic, and I had no idea how I got through them. The only thing I could recall with any certainty was the heat of Darian's hand holding mine. Backstage at a fashion show, it turned out, was madness without method. Nothing but shouting and running, a tornado of light and chaos and shoes. It was impossible to understand what was happening, but somehow things came together. And the models, who had been disheveled and borderline hysterical in the seconds before, glided onto the runway like swans. Could I do this? I didn't think I could do this. I'm gonna be right back, said Darian. Just gonna do my thing. My hand clenched about his, my nails pressing pale, desperate smiles into his skin. But I had to let him go. So I did. Then Chloe was hustling me to one side. This way, she whispered. You can watch. I'm backstage, unsurprisingly, afforded a poor view. Through a dazzle of light, I watched Darian recede and then come back to me. His face, his body, the way he moved were all so composed that it wasn't until he stepped through the wings, grinning, that I quite believed in his return. See, babes, he said. Nothing to it. Serious face on. Giving it a bit of strut. It was slightly too late to say that I didn't strut. I don't, or that I really didn't want to do this. I didn't. But when I stepped onto the catwalk, all of Darian's friends leapt to their feet and burst into wild cheering. Essex, obviously thinking something important was happening, did likewise. I don't think I was much of a model, but I walked, turned, and did not fall over, cresting a wave of entirely undeserved appreciation that continued even as I fled into the wings, where I landed, breathless but safe in Darian's arms, kissing him to a chorus of applause that flashed like fireworks behind my eyes. From there came a haze of laughter and congratulations, Chloe's voice rising stridently across the noise. Why know what, honey, you can have the Glardigan. It's yours, G. Glardigan. Yeah, it's like glamour and cardigan, in it, of course. The day unraveled into evening, event into after party, sweeping me along with it. A group who, Darian informed me, had been on S Factor performed to great enthusiasm, and then a DJ took over. We tumbled round a table near the bar, Gary going to secure the first round. The revelation that I didn't drink inspired a squeal of glee from Darian's friends. They're meant to be Tajiver, cried one of the Laurens. So romantic. I just don't see why you have to be blatted to have it up, said Darian. I am hunged passant sober and hunged passant living. Chloe shook out her mane, which caused a cascade reaction through the group, and suddenly everyone was checking their hair. You are so right, honey, he was. He was. Just then, I didn't need a drink to feel drunk. Darian wound an arm round my waist and said quietly, You gonna come dance with me later? I put my lips to his ear. I want to fuck you later. He gave me one of his wide-eyed, shocked looks, but I knew he was only teasing. Suddenly I felt a hand on my shoulder. I looked up, and there was Niall. I didn't fuck it up. Even I could hear how absurdly giddy I sounded, too bright, too happy, as though, at any moment, I would swoop away on the wings of mania. I tried to care, but I couldn't. Darian and I would run hand in hand across the clouds together. Well? Congratulations. I caught the sourness of drink upon Niall's breath. There was an awkward silence. He was so good, Niall said Chloe valiantly. You would have thought he was like a professional model or someone. I thought you'd left, I said. He scowled. As if I could. Someone has to take care of you. I can take care of myself, I muttered, with all the dignity of a teenager. Essex is well safe, said Gary, returning with a tray of drinks and passing them round. Like there was this one time, right, when Darian thought he was being burgled. A ripple of amusement passed over the table and Darian put his face into his hands. You always have to tell this story, 'cause it's hilarious. That's why. So Darien Air was carrying on like a right gal, totally freaking out, ringing me up, being all, what should I do? What should I do? I think there's somebody trying to get in through the patio doors. And I was like, phone the police. You donut. What am I supposed to do about it? He paused with the casual ease of an experienced raconteur, dropping down into a free chair, and extending both arms across the shoulders of his neighbors. So there he goes, creeping down the stairs at 3 in the morning, with me on the phone and armed with an eyebrow pencil. It was well sharp, put in Darien. And, you know what, right? It's a duck AHT there. Yeah. Yes, said Darien, but it was Obs trying to burgle me. It was a bad duck. I think we should be going, interrupted Niall. We need to get back to London, but I don't want to go, I said plaintively. It's a white, said Darien. It can stay with me. Protect me from bad ducks, right, babes? I tucked my head against his shoulder. See, he needs me. AUDIOBOOK, I do. Darien looked up at Niall and smiled. We'll be a white. I'll take care of him. I saw something flash across Niall's face like a shadow. I sat upright, filled by a sudden, despairing premonition. I shivered, even in the warmth of the Glardigan, and flashed Niall a frantic look, as though, in a split second, I could make him understand. Please don't do this to me. Let me have this. Let me have this happiness. You can't take care of him, Niall said flatly. He's a type 1 bipolar depressive with clinical anxiety disorder. I don't think you even know what that means. For a moment, Darien was silent. His was the only response that mattered, though I told myself it didn't. Watching him was like waiting for an axe to fall, but I could not look away. I do actually, he said, at last. I saw a thing on the telly with Stephen Fry. Niall gave a harsh, barking laugh. Oh, you saw a thing with Stephen Fry? Well, thank God for that. We're saved. Did you get that, Ash? You're going to be fine. He saw a thing with Stephen Fry. We're in the presence of a fucking expert here. I didn't say I was an expert in anything, said Darien slowly. Just that I wasn't totally clueless. I remember reading something in a magazine, added Chloe, about Robbie Williams. Doesn't he have bipolar as well? It was somebody what used to be and take that anyway. Was it Gary? Asked one of the Laurens. Chloe shook her head. Nah, he was the one what was struggling with his weight. I think it was Robbie. Niall slammed his hand onto the tabletop, knocking over a couple of drinks and causing Darien's friends to jump to their feet screaming in fear for their many dresses. Only Darien didn't move. You don't have a fucking clue, Niall yelled, over the chaos. And I'll tell you now, you can't fucking handle it. He threw his words down like swords. What are you going to do when he won't get out of bed or take his medication? When he cuts words into his arms, drinks when he shouldn't, takes drugs when he shouldn't, or sleeps with strangers who are bad for him? Darien flinched. Or what about when he keeps you up all night because he can't sleep? Or has a panic attack out of nowhere? And, let's not forget, what about when he tries to kill himself, again? Or he has another manic episode and won't eat or sleep or stop talking, and thinks he's, what was it again, Ash? Oh yes, Thomas Mallory, and the second coming of Arthur Pendragon. I stared at him, silent and stricken. I didn't dare look at anyone else. Least of all Darien. What about it? Said Darien, finally. Niall shook his head. You have no idea. Do you? You have to live with it, or the threat of it, every single day. Do you really think you could cope with that? I dunno, Darien shrugged. Maybe it ain't about coping or not coping. Maybe it's just about wanting to be with someone. You're so fucking naive. Darien stood up. He was taller than Niall and frowning. I don't think I am. I think you just think I am 'cause I don't talk or think like you do. He paused. I think, I couldn't stand it. Voices were swirling around me, talking about me but not to me. You can't help him, Darien. You can't make him better. I didn't say I was gonna. You can't make him happy either. Darien shrugged. I think I got the right to try. It was like being in hospital again. Reduced from the first person to the third. From subject to object. I was disappearing into other people's sentences. I wanted to speak, but I didn't dare. I didn't know how it would sound. Whether my voice would break. If I would be plausible. If I had the right to want anything at all. What use to the sane, after all, were the words of the mad? Chapter 13. Then, I stood up, turned, and walked away, the lights blurring to smears in my eyes and the owl's castigation stinging my skin as though I'd carved them myself. Again. By the time I'd stepped outside, I was running into the night. Because that's absolutely the way to prove your sanity. I heard a voice calling my name, but I couldn't stop. I couldn't seem to breathe enough air. And I felt paper thin and utterly unreal. Shredded. All I wanted to do was put a barrier of distance between me and everything that had just happened. If only I could also outrun myself. Maybe it would not be so terrible, to disappear entirely, to drift away in fragments beneath the moon, like pieces of torn of lace. To cease to be. That was something I could never make Nyla understand, though I don't know how hard I tried. I had never wanted death, merely cessation. Unfortunately, sometimes, they seemed to be the same thing. Niall had done nothing but tell the truth, though he had wielded it like a weapon. But it was hard to forgive him for it. And Darian? Oh, I couldn't bear to think about Darian. I had never felt quite so ugly, helpless, or naked. But it had been my own fault, for trying to pretend I was otherwise. Was it cold? I thought it might be cold. It was certainly dark. But these considerations beat against me like my body was a window pane. I was visible, but unreachable. A prisoner of myself. Where was I? I had slowed to walking. A road ran by, though not to Camelot. Fields lay on either side. Oh, fuck. Lunatic rider lost in Essex. Maybe I was going to be murdered. Torn apart by wolves. Maybe I'd starve to death under a hedgerow. What did a hedgerow even look like? Okay. These were not rational thoughts. That, at least, I recognized. The important thing was not to panic. Like a shark scenting blood in the water, anxiety rushed over me in a great, devouring wave. No, really, Ash, don't panic. I fumbled for my phone. Of course. Of course. I'd left it with my 4,000-pound suit. So I had a panic attack. A full-on heart-pounding, breath-choking, sweat-pouring, absolutely mortifying panic attack that sent me sobbing and shuddering to my knees in the middle of nowhere. Minutes, hours, years, eternities later, I put myself back together. Still alive. Somehow. Still breathing and still alive. I had two choices. I could go back, or I could go on. Going back was simply not an option. And didn't they say all roads led somewhere? Was this madness? I kept walking and, sure enough, in about 5 minutes I came to a roundabout and a sign pointing the way to Chigwell Station. Another 5 minutes, and the red circle with the blue line loomed out of the darkness like the word of God. I would never have imagined the underground sign could have been such a wonderful sight. I traced a route on the tube map. Central Line to Woodford. Central Line to Bank. That was easy. For a brief, fleeting, blissful moment, I felt in control of my world. I felt normal. And fuck Niall. Chapter 14, Back. Exhaustion set in after I'd changed trains, along with a heavy misery that seeped into me like winter drizzle. Darkness rattled past. But it was all right. That darkness was taking me home. I could pull it round me like a cloak. Occasionally I let myself think of Darian. It felt like poking at an open wound, but I couldn't seem to stop. Niall was sitting on the steps outside my flat, staring bleakly into the middle distance. My God, Ash. He pulled himself up with the railing the moment he saw me approach. I've been ringing and ringing. Are you okay? You look terrible. Get the fuck out of my way. How did you get home? I took the train. Because sometimes, on very special occasions, I am almost a human being. He came towards me and I pulled back, glaring. Ash, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't care. I never want to see you again, Ash. He spread his hands helplessly. You have to understand. I never meant to hurt you. I was trying to protect you. I liked him. He sank back down onto the steps and put his head in his hands, hair falling forward in front of his face. I watched him torturing himself and felt nothing. Not even satisfaction for what he'd done to me tonight. How can you like someone like that? He asked finally. You have nothing in common. What can you possibly have to talk about? He made me feel good. And you fucked it up. If he meant that much to you, he said sharply, you'd have told him yourself. Well, that's up to me, isn't it? I threw the words back at him. Maybe I like looking into someone's eyes and seeing something other than pity, resentment, and guilt. If that's what you see in my eyes, it's because you put them there. Get the fuck off my steps. But he didn't move. And I wanted to be inside, surrounded by walls I had chosen. Why him? He asked, grabbing for me as I tried to scramble past. What does he give you that I couldn't? I shrugged. For starters, he's not trying to prove to someone else what a saint he is for being with me. Niall went white. That's not true. And then, rather desperately, I love you, Ash. I don't want your love. I shook him off and climbed the remaining steps to the front door. Your love is fucking worthless, but I just wanted to make you happy. A note of pleading crept into his voice, and I ignored it. Why wouldn't you let me? I always told myself it was you, not me, that you couldn't. That you were too broken. But now you've found someone who does make you happy. So it must have been me all along. And then he started to cry, hoarse, gulping, undignified sobs that forced their way out of his throat as though they were choking him. I'd never seen him cry before. And tonight I didn't care. I just wanted to fix you, he said. This is who I am. I put my key to the lock. I don't need fixing. I let myself inside and went to bed. I didn't know when Niall left. Chapter 15, Midnight, HT. When the doorbell buzzed a couple of hours later, my instinct was to ignore it, but it kept on buzzing. I dragged myself out of bed, pulled on a dressing gown, and went to growl into the speaker. Will you leave me the fuck alone, bit harsh, babes, said Darian's voice. I got your suit and your phone. I never wanted to see him again. To see disgust, or pity, or discomfort reflected on his face where there had been laughter, admiration, and lust. But it was a bit late to pretend I wasn't in. Fine. I'll come down. Darian was standing on the doorstep, looking unbearably shag-gable, limped in silver moonlight and holding the carrier bag with my suit in it. You're right, he said. Thank you for this. You shouldn't have gone to the trouble, AUDIOBOOK, babes. I'd be like so lost without my phone. I wouldn't know what to do with myself. Right. Yes? Thanks. Goodbye. Thank you for returning my things. Goodbye. I tried to come with you before, he said quickly. But you run fast for a skinny geezer and I couldn't find where you'd gone. Right numpty I'd ever looked wandering errand in circles in Chigwell in the dark for hours and hours with you being tucked up in bed. An unexpected, unwarranted tingle of pleasure ran through me at his easy assumption that, even running into the night without a coat or mobile phone, I'd basically be fine. But then, he didn't know any better. He wouldn't. I'd done nothing but lie to him. You can have been set upon by a whole gang of ducks, I said. Babes, don't joke about it. Ducks are ruthless, I'm telling you. Now are you gonna let me in or what? I had a panic attack. I blurted out. What? I had a panic attack? On the way home, AUDIOBOOK, babes. Are you a white now? Yes. So can I come in? What was this? Kindness? Glittlerland? Naivety, as Niall had said? Did you want something? He gave a shy sort of smile. Well, you said earlier about, his eyes darted anxiously left and right as if he were about to try to sell me something that had fallen off the back of a van. Doing it. I've come to collect. Cassie was well sexy today. I couldn't imagine at what point I'd been even remotely sexy. Did he mean when I'd worn a cardigan? Or when Niall had spat out all my secrets? or when I'd run away from them. I'm not up for a pity fuck, Darian, he blinked. I don't pity you, babes. I think you're doing a white. Actually, I made an odd sound. It had started as a laugh. I'm really not being rude or nothing, but I think what I want to think about you is up to me, babes. There was a long silence. How ridiculous, standing there barefoot in the entranceway to my flat, clinging to a Tesco's bag, and feeling, what? Something sweet and fragile. Far too fragile. You still want me? I regretted the wretched words as soon as I'd uttered them. Insecurity was such an attractive trait. Yet he said and stepped inside. I led him into the flat and flung the bag with my poor suit in it into a corner by the hat stand. We stood awkwardly in the hall, Darian hopping about on one leg like a demented flamingo as he pulled off his boots. I was being stupid. He'd been here before. We'd already slept together. That's the main, possibly only reason I let people into my flat. Bright moments cleaned from the clumsy communion of anonymous skin. That was all Darian was ever supposed to be. Do you want something? I heard myself say. Like a tea or some water or something. Nah, babes. I'm good. There was a hideously self-conscious silence. Bedroom through there, I said at last, pointing. You know, I always thought you had a dead body in there or something. 'Cause like you've never let me in, and you slept with me anyway. He grinned. I guess I must have thought it was worth it. No dead body. I'm just private. He stepped inside. It's like a library in air. And then, the bed is well massive, babes. And then, is this you? You look different. It's my graduation photo. I was very young, nothing but a boy on the brink of madness. Do you still have the robe thing? Somewhere? He gave me a hopeful, coquettish look. Don't even think about it. That's a very prestigious piece of academic dress. I let him wander amongst the pieces of my life, picking things up and putting them down again, peering at photographs and pictures. The one he'd given me was still unframed, but I hadn't thought to take it down from where it was propped on one of my bookshelves. The sight of it made him grin. I knew you liked me, babes. I rolled my eyes. I just haven't found anywhere to put it yet. Yeah. He reached up and ran his hand over the peacock feather fan hanging on the wall, emerald green and turquoise spilling between his fingers, then winked at me. Cheeky bastard. I scowled. Those boxers were unfortunate. They're not my usual taste. You was like Cinderella, babes, running off, leaving only your pants behind. If you're my Prince Charming, I want a refund. He laughed, picking up a feathered carnival mask and peering through its empty eyes. Didn't think you for a clutterer, just in here. What's with the fans and the masks and everything? I shrugged. I like the beauty of artificial things. Oh my God, babes. He pointed at the wall. What's this? No offense, but I think that's the creepiest thing I've ever seen. It's quite all right. I didn't paint it. He leaned forward in transfixed horror. Why've you got a picture of a naked gal and a skeleton? I like the naked gal, girl and the skeleton. It was perhaps the first time I'd ever seen him lost for words. It's a Paul Delvaux, I added, trying to explain. Just a print, obviously. The original's in the Tate Modern. He painted a lot of naked women in strange situations, yeah. But why? Exposure to waxworks at an impressionable age. I dunno how she's managed to doze off with that skeleton staring right at her. And what's that other naked one supposed to be doing? She looks like she's trying to get a taxi to take her home after living it a bit large. I crossed the room and contemplated sleeping Venus. I can honestly say I've never noticed that before. And what about them fellas at the back? What are they supposed to be? Dads at a disco? I think maybe they're lamenting. They should be dancing like that. I put a hand across my mouth, but it was too late. I was laughing. There was nothing for it. I turned him round and kissed him, clumsy with amusement, breath and warmth and mirth mingling in the chalice of our pressed together lips. Want me to get the light, babes? I shook my head and, before my courage could fail, yanked off my dressing gown in the world's most impulsive and ineffective striptease. Darian's eyes blurred to stormy gray. Wow, babes, All this time you didn't even have your PJs under there. You should have said. I wouldn't have bothered with the paintings. I spoke, once again, without thinking. Sure you want me? His fingers climbed my ribs and then skated the ridged flesh that marred my arms from elbow to shoulder, rising a trail of goosebumps almost lost in the ruin. Course, he kissed me lightly. You're so pale, babes. Think I must have some kind of thing for vampires or something. I laughed. Again. Well, at least I'm not an orangutan. Ooh, that's AHT of order. Going to make me sorry. He let out an unsteady breath. Yeah. I pushed him down onto the edge of the bed and knelt across his thighs. He cupped a hand at the back of my neck and pulled me into another kiss, sliding his tongue into my opening, moaning mouth. It was strange to be naked when he was not, slightly vulnerable, but, just then, it didn't trouble me. It brought with it a patchwork of sensation, the cool air and the heat from his body, the roughness of denim and the softness of velvet, all mingled with the pressure of his lips and hands, the places where his skin brushed against mine. My cock rose between us and he wrapped a hand round it, rolling his palm slow hard perfect across the head. I closed my eyes, gasping, and he did it again. What was I being sorry for? I said. Dunno. But are you? Oh yes, I murmured. Very. Yeah, why yes. His other hand glided over my shoulder and slowly down my chest, nails scraping lightly over a nipple. I fell into him, hips driving my cock into the channel of his hand, as I shuddered, helplessly wanting. His breath curled across the top of my ear, and he made a sound of encouragement, pleasure. I wasn't sure. I haven't never, he whispered, with anyone like you. I ground myself against him, my mouth pressed against the side of his neck, flooding with the taste of his skin, a touch of salt, the sour edge of his cologne, and the indefinable essence. Spring water clear. That was Darien himself. You mean, I panted, posh? Insane. Selfishly devoted to the pursuit of my own pleasure. What like, free? And you're not selfish, babes. Having a good time here with you doing that and being like that. It's well special, but, after a moment, I caught him by the wrist, stilling us both. You're right, I tugged the lapels of his jacket. Too many clothes, he laughed. And I should have said bossing me errand. I tumbled off his lap and pulled him to his feet, remembering unexpectedly his body covering mine in a dark room in Brighton and how much I had wanted to see him. And then watching him in my living room, wanting to touch him. I turned away from both at the time, and the vulnerability of giving, like the thief I was. Such a fragile thing, wanting to please someone else. Such endless scope for disappointment and failure. How much easier just to take. You're right, he said again. He put a hand under my chin and made me look at him, though I half pulled away, resisting. Yes, I just want to touch you. His mouth curved into its wide, generous smile. It'd be a bit weird if you didn't, babes, in your world, maybe, I muttered, running a thumb over his chiseled model's cheekbones. I unwrapped him slowly like it was Christmas and somebody had given me a shyly shivering glitter pirate, who made soft, uncertain purring noises beneath my mouth and fingers. Surely the best present I've ever had. I lingered over the smooth expanse of his skin, taut as silk over his sleek muscles, felt the beating of his heart, the rise and fall of his breath, and the heat that gathered like a benediction beneath my mouth. My fingers and lips became the enthralled cartographers of his flesh. My tongue traced the deep blue vein that ran like a river down his forearm, down to the branching tributaries that formed a delta at his wrist, and across the intricate paths that scored his palm. I'd done this in Brighton, at the time hardly knowing why, bewildered by my response to him, wanting everything and nothing at the same time. I stroked the sinewy muscles of his upper arms and shoulders, tasted the deep hollows of his clavicles, the intersection of throat and collarbone, a secret, pendant-shaped plateau of skin ridged by ranges of bone. I slipped downwards, traversing the subtle plains and valleys of his body all the way to the neatly trimmed hair that formed a tantalizing trail between the V of his obliques, leading from belly to perfectly groomed groin. I dropped to my knees, and in the sudden, breathless silence, I actually heard him swallow. On a strange, entirely inexplicable whim, I turned my head and kissed the inside of his knee. I swept my hands up his thighs, the muscles flexing beneath my palms, the skin hot, and then I leaned forward and swirled my tongue over the straining head of his cock, sweeping up a drop or two of precum that had gathered there. My glitter pirate made a noise that sounded a bit like yep. I glanced up, heedless, smiling, generally idiotic. He wore an expression of intense concentration, as though someone had asked him to do a really nasty piece of long division without the aid of calculator. "You right?" I asked softly, in terrible Essex. His hips moved infinitesimally. He opened his mouth. Said nothing. Then, why yeah. I curled a hand about his hip, over Gary actually, and the other at the base of his cock. And then I took him in my mouth. Darian gave a hoarse cry that he tried to turn unconvincingly into a cough. One of his hands fluttered down to rest very lightly in my hair. "Oh my God, babes," the words blurred into an incoherent whole. "I gotta sit down if you're gonna do that. I'll fall over." I had to stop sucking his cock to laugh. "Bed's behind you." He flopped down as though he didn't have a single bone left in his body. "Well, maybe one." I crawled forwards, dignity. "What's that?" Pushed his knees apart and pressed in close. Darian leaned back on his elbows, his chest rising and falling rapidly as he struggled to control his breathing. "I've barely started," I said. "I'm at him gone 80. I ran my tongue up the underside of his cock, teasing him. Do that thing again." "What thing?" He made a tortured sound. "What you just did." "You know, I might have forgotten." His hips sput, his cock thudding against my lips, leaving a damp smear that I licked up gladly. He whined. Adorably. I gripped him again, circled his cock with my tongue and my lips, until he was arching off the bed, and then I took pity on him, opened my mouth and slid down on him until I met my own hand. It had been, in all honesty, a while, and my gag reflex spasmed in protest. But it was worth it, entirely worth it, as Darian grabbed the nearest pillow and covered his face with it, muffling a blissed-out moan. I prodded him in the knee until he emerged. And when he was back with the program, I took my hand away, letting the last few inches of his cock sink into my mouth. I spread wide my arms in an absurd look no hands gesture that made him laugh and then gasp and then groan. "You're well good at that, babes," he mumbled. "Well good. Like professional standard." I spat him out, trailing saliva and choking with laughter, a few tears leaking from the corners of my eyes. "That is not a compliment, sex." He sat up, aghast. "Oh no, babes. I didn't mean, oh no. What am I like? What I want to know," I said wickedly, "is where you acquired this knowledge of professional standard oral no. No, I haven't. I didn't mean, it's just like, if something is proper good, right, you sometimes think, wow, it's so good, you could get paid for doing it, right? So you're saying I should jack in writing and become a rent boy, what?" "No." He paused, his eyes narrowing, and then he grinned. "Ah. Okay. You got me. You was just messing about." I pressed my face into his thigh, my shoulders shaking as I tried to stop laughing. He cleared his throat. "I say," he said, in an outrageous RP accent, "suck me off at once." "Rawr." I glared at him in outrage. "I do not sound like that. I've never said I say, or get on with it, peasant." I bit his leg, hard enough to make him gasp, and then drew his cock back into my mouth, so devoted to the act of pleasing him that I barely flinched when the head nudged the back of my throat. I drowned in the scent and the taste of him, pausing in my attentions to steal a glimpse at his face. His eyes were closed, the lashes casting crescent shadows over his cheeks, his mouth slightly open. He looked enraptured and beautiful. His eyes flicked open, catching me in an act that felt far more intimate than putting his cock in my mouth. He smiled. "Stupid man." He touched me gently on the shoulder, twisted a lock of my hair around his finger, and I hollowed my cheeks and fucked him with my mouth. His hand tightened convulsively in my hair. The other groped for the pillow and dumped it back over his face. I reached up and pulled it away, tossing it over my shoulder. I heard it crash into something, but I didn't care enough to stop. Babes, he muttered, twisting about like he was trying to stop himself thrusting. He let me go, covering his eyes with the heels of his hands, elbows closing over his face like a theater curtain. But I could still hear him, his frantic breath, and the strange, endearing hiccups of his swallowed moans. In a while, when he was so close I could practically taste it, I sat back. Like this. Or, however you want it, babes. Long as it happens. I looked up at him, sprawled all sweaty, desperate, and blissfully undone on my Egyptian cotton sheets. Can I fuck you? Course. I pushed him back and crawled over him, a glide of skin, smooth as glass and water, but so hot and real, taut and trembling with desire. His arms came around me and we were kissing, messy and urgent in a collision of mouths. I reached beyond him to the drawer of my bedside table, rummaging around blindly until I found a condom and some lube. You got some kinky stuff in there, babes, said Darian cheerfully, tucking a pillow under himself. Shut up or I'll use it on you. He hooked a leg over my hip, and I pushed a slicking finger into him, followed by another, teasing the tight muscle to receptiveness. Darian's concentration face was back, a thin little line standing out between his brows. I won't hurt you. I pressed forward to drop another kiss on him. His head was thrown back against my pillows. You ain't. I wrapped my free hand round his cock and gave it a reassuring stroke. He squeezed his eyes shut, teeth biting his lower lip. What's wrong? Nothing. Just probably look stupid. You look amazing. That one a tiny smile. So hot. It's what was it he said? Well, special. The worst of it was, I meant every word. I put a hand beneath his leg and knelt between his thighs, ripping open the condom with my teeth, then rolling it on and lubing up one-handed. A glance at his face confirmed he was trying not to laugh. Don't you dare. Such a pro, babes. I positioned myself and reached him carefully, gritting my teeth against an urge to simply press forward and sheath myself inside him. You really shouldn't mock people when they're about to stick their cock up your arse. His breath hitched. I stroked the underside of his thigh, inched a little further. His eyes had gone very wide. A few drops of sweat fell from my brow and mingled with the moisture that already glittered on his torso. I'd meant to torment him, just a little. Make him work for it. Beg me for it, perhaps. Or just moan in helpless abandon for me to take him. But then I glanced down and the side of his body spread around mine utterly undid me. I gasped out his name, and a scattering of obscenities, and thrust myself into him, deep, then deeper, until our bodies met. A delirious rainbow of light unraveled behind my eyes, a herald of utter and heedless ecstasy. I was afraid I might have hurt him with my lack of control, but Darian was stretched out beneath me, his head thrown back again to show the straining muscles of his neck, and the fingers of one hand were clinging to the entry. Kate iron curlicues of my bedstead. Exquisite. It was my last coherent thought. All that was left was the tight heat of his body, his name to be whispered like a prayer, the taste of his mouth, the heavy sense of skin and sex and both of us together, the way his fingers tightened around the metal. His harsh gasps and broken cries, my hand on his cock, moving in the same rough rhythm as my thrusts. The impossible Ouroboros of want and wanting, the twin pleasures of giving and taking, swirled together as richly as oils upon a canvas. I forced my eyes open, fought my body's response and my instinct for selfishness. It was enough. A fingerhold on the precipice of desire, to stop me tumbling headlong into my own private rapture. A hard thrust, a twist of my hand on his cock, and the incantation of his name was all it finally took, his body shuddering under mine, his pleasure spilling over my fingers and onto his belly. I followed him mere moments later, collapsing into his waiting arms as I came in an intense, wrenching rush. Endless moments of nothing but joy and glittering pieces of madness. And, through the broken mirrors of bliss-closed eyes, glimpses of happiness in refracted rainbows. I clung to Darian, shattered, thoughtless, mindless, pleasure-racked, safe. I came back to myself, to my shaking, panting, sweating, aching body, and found it bearable. I peeled myself off Darian, dispensed with the condom, and went for a towel on unsteady legs. Afterwards we lay together, and I kissed the faint freckles that scattered his shoulders in defiance of his spray tan. "You're well good at that, babes," he said sleepily. "Especially with your mouth." Like, wow. I trailed my fingers over Gary. "Take that, bitch. I'll put it on my CV," I murmured. "Excellent cocksucker, but I should really check it for you properly, babes. As a favor or whatever, how noble you are." "I'm well noble, me." "You know what, oh dear, what? We should get the wavy things what the judges have on Strictly. I beg your pardon, you know, the wavy things with the scores on 'em." 7. I do not watch Strictly Come Dancing. God, babes, you don't watch MasterChef. You don't watch Strictly. No wonder you're bipolar depressed. Thank you, doctor. I was silent a moment. Wait a minute. Did you just say you would rate my blowjob as a 7? Get the fuck out of my bed. He laughed and didn't move. Chapter 16. Later. I woke in a panic, plastered to Darian's velvet warm back, one arm draped across him, the other crooked wordly under the pillow, completely numb. I scrambled into a sitting position and pulled my knees up to my chest, trying to calm my body's anxieties and my mind's chaos. But it was no use. My heart raced. My thoughts whirled. Darian slept on. At least until I prodded him awake. "Darian! Darian!" He rolled over, tousled and lovely, blinking dazedly in the half-light. "What's wrong, babes?" I stared at him, for a moment utterly speechless at the magnitude of everything. "I'm going to make you so unhappy," I blurted out. "What? When? Can't you do it in the morning, see?" I said, somewhat hysterically. "I've already started. I'm waking you up in the middle of the night, "'S-okay," he mumbled, also sitting up. "I haven't got nothing planned for tomorrow. Next shoot is next week, I think. I can't do this." I wrapped my arms tightly around my knees and huddled at the top of the bed. "I can't be with someone. I ruin everything, but I like being with you, babes." "You're not gonna ruin nothing, you don't understand." He touched my arm and I shook him off. "I know Stephen Fry has you up to speed, but I'm not charmingly quirky. I'm clinically insane. I've been in hospital. Involuntarily. Because I was too nuts to know I was nuts. We've all got flaws, babes." I glared at him. "You're not taking me seriously." "Well, you just said you was mental, Darian, babes." He wasn't getting it. I was a muddle of longing, frustration, and pain, my mind scattering like seabirds. "I'm not a fucking plural," I snapped. What I pointed at myself. "Item 1, babe, a white," he said. "Mr. A. Winners, Esquire." I folded my hands across the tops of my knees and pressed my face into them. "Please don't laugh at me." "No," he said, so gently it made me want to weep. "You see," I mumbled. "This is what I'm like." Niall was right about me. Everything he said was true. You'll end up hating me like he does. I don't want to do that to you, so. You don't have to. I might not have a choice. And if you say we always have a choice, I'll kill you with a pillow." There was a long silence. I sensed, rather than saw, Darian moving in the gloom. His smooth, naked shoulder brushed lightly against mine, sending a flare of response through the twisted labyrinth of my scars. I flinched. He kept making me feel things in ruined places. "Look," he whispered. "I'm not clever like you, but I think it's going to be a white. I'm with you because I like being with you, and that's, a white. And when it ain't a white, then I won't be with you. I'm not gonna let you treat me bad, babes." "Oh great, so you're just going to walk out on the mentally ill guy when the going gets tough, babes?" I'm confused. "Are you sad 'cause you think I'm going to be with you, or sad because you think I'm not?" I don't know. All my doubts and all my fears were snarled up into a matted ball like hair fished out of the bathroom sink. And I couldn't tell which were real and which were baseless, how much I was protecting myself, or if I was in my twisted, useless way trying to protect him. Some distant dead end in my mind was just about capable of recognizing that I did not want to martyr to my depression, but I couldn't link my thoughts into a path that would take me there. I was a rat in the maze of my own thinking, and all the floors were electric, and all the exits were locked. I don't know, we haven't hardly started, said Darian soothingly. But what if I go mad again? What if I get depressed? He shrugged. You could get hit by a bus or something tomorrow. Thanks. That's really consoling. I'm just saying. I took in a deep, slow breath, willing myself to calm, to honesty, to courage. In short, all the things I didn't have. If he left now, it would be my choice. If he left later, it would be his, and I would be helpless. And hurt? Darian, I tried to kill myself. Now left me in the middle of a major depression, and I tried to kill myself. He was silent, so I went on. He felt guilty and came back to apologize and found me. Must have been well hard for both of you. Yes, death is so very ugly. They don't tell you that. But it is. I remembered little. I had already been sunk. And Niall's departure had been inevitable. Even welcomed, because he'd taken with him the last reason to keep struggling. Finally, the freedom to do something for me. Only for me. My last and greatest gift. I could make it stop. I had lacked the foresight for pills. Or the courage to leap in front of a train or off a building. But, clutching a knife from the kitchen, I had felt, for the briefest of brief moments, a shining, perfect euphoria. Lost, of course, in the undignified mess that followed. And how could I forgive Niall? I hated him for every day that's hard to live. I searched Darian's eyes for horror and condemnation, and found none. But then, I'd seen his portfolio. He was a model, the master of his face. That may well be someday, I said. He nodded slowly. I guess I'll have to see about it then. What the fuck is wrong with you? How can you care for me when I've always got one foot out the door? I dunno. Look, babes. I know you think I'm a bit shallow, and I probably am, to be honest with you, but I don't think it's going to be easy, and I don't think it's always gonna be a white. But even if it ain't always a white, that's a white as well, 'cause sometimes things just ain't, and that's how they are. And I think there ain't no point worrying about stuff that might never happen. Oh God, I groaned. Yoda's back? Yeah, his fingers whispered against the side of my face in the dark until I lifted my head. He tugged me into a kiss. The angle was awkward and his mouth tasted of sleep, but I didn't care. I could have fallen into it, the sailor abandoning himself to the waves, just like in Brighton, but Darian wasn't a stranger anymore. I couldn't use him like that again, not when his kisses were full of promises he couldn't keep. Not with me. I pulled away on a sigh of sheer physical need. I'm a terrible risk to take with your happiness, I dunno, he said. I mean, sadness is just a thing what happens. And sometimes people just have to go, you know, he shrugged. I'm sorry things were so bad, babes. But there ain't no point wishing you was different, 'cause then you wouldn't be you. No, I whispered. I'd be better. I wish I'd met you before it all went wrong. I don't think you would have liked me back then. Do you really believe I have to be the ruin of myself to like you? Nah. I just think it's what's now what matters. Anyway, he added, before I could respond to that piece of hallmark wisdom with the contempt it deserved. You gonna show me or what? Show you what? His upper arm nudged against mine. What you done? There was a long silence. I was glaring at him, but he probably couldn't see it. I wondered if this was the instinctive, prurient curiosity that made people stare at car crashes. But, perhaps, just perhaps, I wanted to believe him. That, even if it wasn't alright, it would be alright. What did that even mean? Was he some kind of idiot savant? Or just a man who genuinely didn't fear the pain of liking me, but maybe the stark truth, written on my skin, would change his mind? Oh, for fuck's sake. Fine, I uncoiled myself, leaned over, and flicked on the bedside lamp. Darian winced in the dazzle, blinking and rubbing his eyes like a child in a picture book. I thrust out my arms, hands turned palm up, so he could see the long, white fishbone of scar and stitching that ran from my right wrist almost to the elbow, and its shorter, jagged sibling on the left. Ugly enough for you? Or do you want the rest as well? He took my hands in his, holding me outstretched, shudderingly exposed. I don't think it's ugly. It's just there. Well, I hate that it's there. Why, babes? Well, not even managing to kill yourself properly is a bit of competence, Nadir, don't you think? I dunno. I reckon it's pretty hard. I mean, being alive is like what Jim call it, like blinking, you know, just something you do without having to think about it. I shook my head. For most people, perhaps. For me it's a daily commitment I sometimes don't feel like macking. But I hate that I tried. And I hate that I failed. This doesn't represent some beautiful moment in which I chose life. It's a fuck up, pure and simple. If it was up to me, I wouldn't be here. His eyes held mine. In the circle of light from my lamp, they were greenish blue, like looking at the sky when you're swimming underwater. That true, babes? I opened my mouth to answer, but I couldn't meet all that sincerity, all that hope and generosity, with a lie that made things simple for me. Sometimes, I said, finally, but not always. It would have been so much easier, but then I swallowed. I suppose I would have lost some moments too. 66. It was strange, perhaps terrible, but somehow I found it easier to talk about wanting to die than wanting to live. They're not the moments I ever thought I'd want, I went on. Sometimes I think they're very small. Like the crunch of autumn leaves. And the scent of lapsang. And writing, maybe. And you, Darian? He leaned over and kissed, not the scars, but the heel of my hand, as I had once, twice now, kissed him. AWW, babes. I think you're Amazon. There was another long silence. And then his fingers touched my upper arms, the meaningless non-pattern of scars and slashes. What about this? That's just old lunacy, from my first manic episode. I can't even remember doing it. They told me later that I thought there were lost words trapped in my skin and I was releasing them back into the world. Like the flock of phoenix, I tried to laugh, but nothing came out. Darian's fingertips circled and swooped, trailing a feathery warmth across my skin, lighting up the lines on the madman's etch-a-sketch I'd made of my body. Scars or not, it felt the same. What was the words? I don't know. I can't read them. It's all senseless. It always was. He leaned in, and I shivered self-consciously beneath such close regard. Trying to crack the Da Vinci Code? I asked. He laughed, looked up, and kissed me with such swift cunning I had no hope of evading it. You're white, babes. Oh, how I wished it were true. Instead I wound myself round him like poison ivy and clung. Barth said Langage is a skin. I'm sure he never meant it quite this literally. Who's Barth's? Bart. French literary critic. Gay. Perhaps overly fond of his mother. Prone to nervous breakdowns. You know such a lot of things, babes. I shrugged. He used to be one of my heroes. You went off him. That's a bit harsh. He's dead, safe in the gloom. I stretched up and put my lips shyly to the edge of his jaw. He won't mind. But why? He was hit by a laundry truck. Yeah. Har har. I meant, why'd you go off him? You donut? For a moment, I was silent, my head tucked against his shoulder, while I listened to the sounds of his body, magnified by the night. I could almost imagine I heard the brush of one eyelash against another, the rush of blood through veins and arteries, the cells of his body dying, dividing, and multiplying, like eggshells cracking. Finally I said, unhappy is the man who has need of heroes. I ain't being funny, babes. But now you're just being clever in a way that means you don't have to answer the question. I kissed him under the ear. I'm sorry, Darian. I don't know what I like anymore. I don't know if what I think is what I think, if what I feel is what I feel, if any of it at all is me. If there is a me that isn't just a reflection of or a response to mental illness, course there is, babes. How will I know? 'Cause you will. You'll know when someone's real. I gave a laugh so harsh it hurt my throat. I don't, though. That's the fucking problem. What part of insane did you miss? The next thing I knew, I was on my back, Darian stretched on top of me, his hips cradled by my hips, his legs pushing mine apart. "I reckon you'll figure it AHT. He caught my unconvincingly protesting hands and bore them down against the pillows. His mouth nipped its way up my neck and then settled over mine. And he held me and kissed me until there was nothing else. Chapter 17, Rose. Tomorrows slipped away sweetly in a haze of sex, one after another.